Today on the show, we're going to explore digital innovation in green tech. Our guest today is Sanders Lazier. Sanders is a CEO and co founder of Carbonhound, building a platform that simplifies carbon management to make it easy and affordable for businesses to take climate action.
So it's really simple. So we want to make it incredibly easy for businesses to understand and reduce their climate impact. There's a lot of different ways to do that, but what we found was that there's three main areas where companies are struggling. Businesses are going to have to be prepared, but a lot of them don't even know that this is something that's coming down the pipe. So we're trying to put the word out about that.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Beyond Product podcast. My name is Moshe Mikanovsky and I'm your host. I always love seeing, companies that are using their own products. So I know recently you moved to a new office. Do you use your product for your own? And I hope you say yes. But do you use your product to see what is your carbon footprint? And do you have to report it to someone? Like, do you report it to your clients?
So it's actually a really funny question because we're just finishing up our 2022 data now. We've been a bit delayed on it, but we've basically used it as an opportunity to train some of the folks in our team. And yeah, we are going to be putting that on our website. We're going to be getting it verified, all of that. So yeah, we're quite excited for that because I think living the values is obviously quite important to us. So but there's lots of challenges that we've had in calculating our footprint than any other business would have, right? It's difficult to get access to the information. It's a co-working space. How do we figure that out? What are the impact? How do we calculate the impact of server usage?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Even looking at the hidden impact of, for example, the capital that we hold with our bank, right? So,
But that's
um,
that's the
you
best way
know,
for you to learn also what your clients are going to be facing. So it's a great
yeah,
experience right there. Absolutely, great learning out there. I would love to try to solve a problem like that myself because it does seem like a big problem and very good problem to solve. Let me ask you something a bit different. About the market timing. Like, do you find that yes, this is now the right time? Everyone is talking about AI and all of that stuff, so it seems like. And you can also mention if you guys are doing anything with AI, but in general, is this you see that the market is ready for that?
uh, it depends. So I think when I was originally building the product, right, we were really thinking about what is that 1 to 500 company look like. And they're going to be buying it. There's going to be loads of people that are going to buy it, and we're going to take a product led approach, which is a bunch of nonsense, right? Because there's no true product led growth. You look at Box, you look at all these companies that are technically product led growth, and they all have sales teams and big ones.
Hmm.
Um, so we just didn't see the volume that we expected from that market. And so that really forced us to rethink our target market and move to the larger and start targeting the slightly larger companies. Not that we don't service and would love to service smaller businesses as well. We just found it was really difficult to pick that needle out of the haystack of the companies that were actually they wanted to take clear climate action. Um, and I think part of that from a timing perspective is two things. One is that regulations are coming into play between 2024 and 2027, depending on the size of the business. So
Mhm.
therefore, you're starting to see the trickle down effect is happening. But if you look at let's look at a large company, let's say like Microsoft, right? So if they're looking at their thousands of suppliers, they're going to look at, okay, let's check out our tier one and tier two. So suppliers, they're going to be 80, 90+% of our impact, most likely, because they're the ones that we're spending the most with. We're going to attack that first. Those companies also traditionally will, by their nature, be larger companies, right? Because they've got larger revenues, because they've got large clients like Microsoft. We haven't seen, so when I say trickle down, I mean trickle down. Like it just hasn't hit the small market,
But eventually
especially
it
yet.
will. Hmm.
But eventually, my belief is that it will, and to different degrees, of course. Like D2C companies aren't going to have the same impact as a B2B company who's looking to get those bigger clients. But regardless, if you're a PR firm, even for a large company, you're going to be part of that, that report group. So um, I, the answer is, I think we are a little bit early, but it gives us the opportunity to position ourselves and get market share
Yeah.
so that as that market grows, we're positioned well to take advantage of that growth.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that kind of jumps at me when you mentioned the product led strategy is that when a company has to provide their carbon footprint to report it to their vendors, it's not like zero. It's almost like 0 and 1. It's not like if they, correct me if I'm wrong there, if they will only do it in part of the organization, what good is that going to give them? So it has to be like the full organization, right?
You would think that, but it's actually not the case. So
Oh, interesting.
um, in carbon accounting is a very complicated, can be a very complicated thing. We
So
try to
let's
simplify it
not
the
get
best
into
we
the
can,
complications there.
but very simply, depending on the size of the organization, you've got three different categories of emissions in every organization. The first two are fairly straightforward. The third one's very complicated and has 15 different subcategories. So what often we see is that it's a little bit of a journey, right? So
I see.
you can even, a great example is the banks, right? So you look at a RBC or Scotiabank or any one of the banks, they're rolling out reporting on their financed emissions. So, i.e., if I give you $1 million to build an oil well, then I need to be accounting for the impact of that money that I'm lending to because of the end use of it, right?
Hmm.
Um, they're doing it sector by sector. So, real estate first, oil and gas, looking at the high intensity sectors from a carbon perspective and prioritizing those first because it's a huge lift from a data perspective for those organizations to get that level of data that they need. So it's definitely, there's an element you can, depending on the size of your organization and the complexity, you can do a big bang. But what we often find is it's a journey and
Okay.
kind of build up to full fidelity and increase the fidelity over time. So, go from
Yeah.
estimates to actuals.
That's actually sounds great because it's almost like parallel to building a software that you do it iteratively and you build it in stages. So it's almost like you start small and you grow with that, which kind of, I mean, now that I'm thinking about it, thank you for explaining that because I didn't know that. So it makes a lot of sense. So let's talk a bit about your revenue model. You mentioned there is a platform, but you also give a service because you help them understand, your clients understand, what is this, all of this carbon footprint reporting is all about and all that stuff. So tell us a bit about that, and how do you plan on scaling?
Yeah, so it's hard. We try to keep our pricing as transparent as possible, but um, when talking about scope three particularly, it can get quite tricky. But at its essence, we've got platform fees. So what's the cost? Just a monthly cost charged annually upfront to access the platform based on the number of employees that you have, and then the scaling really starts to happen based on the number of locations and the amount of data that we're ingesting. So
Right. Hmm.
that's how we try to charge less for simple carbon footprints and more for more complicated ones. And so that was a really difficult challenge from a product perspective because we're trying to figure out how do we keep pricing simple, but also account for the extra level of effort and required to service these more complicated vendors. So if you look at most people in our space, they'll have fairly opaque pricing, and so from a product strategy perspective, we wanted to be as transparently as we possibly could be, and we've found that to be beneficial in terms of attracting clients and creating that level of transparency that we feel creates
Yeah.
more credibility and integrity with our offering.
Yeah, that's great. Transparency is always important, and using data that you have there for a number of sites and number of data points makes a lot of sense with what you said before about making it quantifiable and taking it away from this blurry area of ESG. So that's great. the investors, how do they look at that? What do you see from the side of investors? Do they feel the market is right and it's sustainable and it's going to be growing?
The proof is in the pudding, as they say. So if you look at climate tech as a proportion of overall funding over the last few years, it's only gone up. It's slightly down over the last 12 months, but as a proportion, it's increased. So even in a market where you've got shrinking venture capital investment, climate tech is taking a larger proportion of that investment, even in a down period. So from an investment perspective, I would say, we feel quite confident that if as long as we execute and we hit our KPIs, that we'll be in good shape.
Oh, so that sounds great. And you do have, initial pre-seed, I believe, several investors.
Yeah.
So that's also great, to have that investor proof, I guess, with showing that, right?
Yeah. So we've raised about 1.5 million so far into the company.
We mentioned a bit about before about not being a technical founder, but as a non-technical founder, how did you build the platform? What do you do?
Yeah, so I think in the ideal state, you find a technical co-founder that you can work with, right? So
Hmm.
I do feel like there's two reasons for that. One is that one of the challenges of bringing a co-founder in later, or really any technical person in later to the process, is they don't have the same context. So there's definitely ramp up in terms of getting them to the same context that you might have on the problem because you've been working it for longer. The second thing is that you can be way more capital efficient. So you can both work on it on the side of your desk, or if you're already working at night. Um, and so it gives you a lot more time to figure out the market, get those initial customers, and validate as much as you can before you take the leap. But if both of those aren't options, I mean, in my case, I went founder dating online, and reached out to a bunch of people, and just basically kind of had a bunch of drinks after work with folks and got to know them a bit and tried to really get an understanding of who might be a great partner for me. So um, I didn't really have a network in Toronto, so that was a big challenge for me. But that's the first thing I did. And then the second thing while I was doing that was, again, even if you're non-technical, you can still hire an organization. In our case, we worked with Root Quotient to help build out that MVP to try to
Hmm.
de-risk the technical element and just try to get those initial customers so that you can attract that premium technical talent. Because at the end of the day, the best technical people have options, right? So you need to seem credible. You need to seem like you've got a plan. You need to have traction. You want to make that as appealing as possible to that technical person, so that you can get the right talent on board to help
Right.
continue to
Right.
build the product. So, um, there's an element of build it and they will come from that perspective, but it really is the case that if you can identify the right problem area and you can show that there's customer desire for that, and you know if you can get them early enough that they can build the product for nothing, great. But if you can't, then leveraging outsourced technical providers is really, really important so that you can continue to build that story. And maybe you can get investment, but often it's tough to raise investment as a non-technical single founder. So don't suggest that at all. And then, as I said, just get a great designer will also massively de-risk implementations as well. So working with a designer and getting someone who has worked with lots of engineers before, they can set it up in a way that handoff can be a lot smoother and reduce the execution risk on that MVP. So I really can't speak enough to the importance of
Absolutely.
having a designer early.
Absolutely. So you basically surrounded yourself with the right people, either by finding the right founder, deploying or working with a company like Root Consent that had the expertise to build it, and then bringing up the right designer. Do you have any insights for other founders that are in this situation?
I feel like everyone says this and it's kind of rote, but it's so true, which is just deeply understand the problem. I think I made a lot of assumptions at the beginning of this journey, And I wish I had spent more time in a more structured approach with a design thinking methodology to, and then getting that in front of customers and getting more feedback from customers directly and really challenging and understanding the hypotheses that we were proving, I think is really important. Um, because if you do that, then at least you're building, right? So I think it's, if you don't understand the underlying hypotheses, if you don't do the initial user research in a deep enough fashion, like spend money on that. Like don't be afraid of spending money on your customer research because it'll pay you back 10 times over. And then that would be the biggest thing, because it's so easy just to have this vision in your head of something that you want to be in the world and then just be completely biased in terms of building that thing that you want to see.
Yeah.
But building is the absolute last thing that you should be doing. Get the customers and then build.
Yeah. Perfect. So throughout this discovery and talking with people, did you find that you were not maybe talking with the right people, or you have to look for other people to talk with?
Yeah, I think it's making sure that you're speaking to people that are in your target audience, which is why it's so important to do that research and have hypotheses around what your target audience is first, and then source some people to go after it. Because a
Mm.
lot of the folks that we were talking to initially, I think, wouldn't necessarily be ones that we would be targeting today, right?
Okay.
So,
Okay.
I mean, part of that is just learning. Part of that is could we have been a bit more thoughtful and strategic about that, maybe. But yeah, I think it's look, the whole thing's hard. Everyone's gonna make mistakes, so just build some empathy in for yourself that you're gonna make those
Hmm.
mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at
That's
the end
very
of the day, if you
important as
really,
well. Hmm.
yeah, I mean, if you understand your customer problems and you work with them to solve it, then you're going to be in a really good place. For example, when I was working in the UK at a company called Good Lord, the reason why I think that product has been so successful is because they were lucky enough to get an investor who is also in the industry that they're solving the problem for. And they went and they worked in the office of that business with the people that they're solving the problem for.
Uh-huh.
And every single design, I'd look at them like, hey, how about that? And then they would put and so everything they built was really, really kind of user driven. And I think it's a really tough balance between vision and what your customers are saying and trying to align those two things together, because what your customer will get you there eventually. You might get somewhere else that you didn't expect, but there is an element of vision that's important in terms of driving overall direction for the company.
Hmm.
But you also have to match that to ensure that you're validating that mission and that vision with your current clients so that you're not
Yeah.
driving in the wrong direction.
It's amazing. Every time I speak with founders like you, I always amazed at how product management and entrepreneurship are so similar in this way, because really that discovery is so important to get to anywhere.
There's one really interesting framework that I feel is really underused. That as I went through this process of doing product discovery, I started using more and more, and that's my sales background, right? So when you think about high tech sales, there's a methodology called the Sandler methodology where you look at the three different levels of pain. So the first level of pain is what's called technical pain. So
Mm,
this product is hard to use,
right,
let's say.
right.
The second level is the business impact. So that's where you would ask, okay, tell me more about that. What's the impact of that? Well, we're spending double the amount of time, like we're spending 10 hours a day trying to input this information. And sometimes it's inaccurate because it just takes too long. People don't have time to do it.
Right.
Okay, tell me more about that. So if you had something that was, how much do you think we could cut that by? So you get into the details, you figure out what the numbers are. So that's the business impact. And then the third thing is the personal impact. So you're working 10 hours a day. What's that impact on you? Well, it means that, my KPIs are down because we can't reduce the processing time. It means I don't get to see my kid before he goes to sleep. Right. So I think that the one thing, in my opinion, that is undervalued is sales discovery is very, very, very similar to, and in fact, sometimes more useful than a way that product discovery is sometimes done, because it's trying to understand and build a business case for what will actually get people to buy your product, which is what you need
Wow.
at the end of the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I've found that that skill has been very helpful from a product perspective to help make sure that we're building things that are impactful. And I would suggest that you look at books like Never Split the Difference, and you look at the Sandler sales methodology.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of valuable pieces of wisdom in there that product managers would benefit from.
I love everything you said, mainly because early in my career as a product manager and before that as an engineer, I always saw the tension between sales and product. But the more and more I go throughout that, and especially talking with entrepreneurs like you, and you're coming from that sales perspective, there is so many synergies there. It's just a matter of getting to the root of it. And the root of it is really what pains people have personally and what do they feel about these things. So that's great. So where are you going from here? What are the plans for the future for Carbonhound?
Well, it's really thinking about how do we take our product and look at the attributes that make us special in terms of the data ingestion, the ease of use, the integrity of the data that we have, and looking at those product and company strengths and thinking about, okay, how do we take those strengths and leverage them in different use cases in order to create value? So for us, it's looking at how do we create, how do we create value within the financial ecosystem and help create lower costs of capital for organizations that are doing the right thing? How do we work with large companies who are trying to reduce the emissions of their supply chains, but lack comparable and complete data to be able to reward those companies in their supply chains and be a solution to help them do that and help create, again, rewards, like help them facilitate rewarding companies in those supply chains to do the right thing. So really, it's about how do we tie climate to profit and make that connection really obvious so that we can grow the market faster and create more and more incentives for businesses to do good and do well.
That's great. That's great. That's a great vision, and I see how it all ties into everything you told me so far. So, in your own words, if you want to summarize it, what are the burning problems that you're solving with the product?
We're solving an integrity problem. We're trying to facilitate trust between different parties, right? So that's one core problem. The other key problem that I think we're solving is addressing the climate knowledge gap. So as you've seen, huge number of businesses have a need for this reporting. The number of practitioners isn't growing, and the amount of people with experience isn't changing, right? There's a lot of people entering the field, and there's a huge gap in terms of that mid-market, especially around climate knowledge and be able to execute on high credibility strategies. So it again goes back to trust, right? So how do we help build trust between, what those companies are reporting and what their stakeholders need? Whether it's their employees, whether it's their customers, whether it's the regulators, the problem we're solving is trust and credibility.
Right. And I love how it started from your personal story of trying to make a better world for your son, and then how you learn through that process and talking with all of this organization and see their problems, which are, yes, maybe that's the goal, but there is a deeper thing there, like trust between people and trust between organization. So that's great. What do you hear people, the responses? You're doing a lot of pitches out there, and we met in a couple of conferences. What do you hear people are saying and their response to this?
So there's some company, honestly, it's very rare that people are like, oh, that's cool, I need that. Most of the time, they're like, I don't really understand how this impacts my business,
Oh,
right?
really?
And then you start asking questions, and then they get more and more interested. So I remember we were at this SMB conference, and it was always really fun because I would see how far we could turn people around in 5 minutes, right? Um, Fundamentally, if you've like what we've found is that if you've got a regulatory problem or a stakeholder problem, the conversation is, thank God we found you. We don't know what we're doing. Please help.
Mm.
So that's that's the primary response, which is great. We love
That's
trying
that's
to
that's a
empower and
thing every
enable those
company would
people.
love to see, of course. Yes.
Yeah, of course. But then everybody else, it's a little bit. It's a problem that you don't know that you have until you have it. So it's educating people on the fact that this is coming down the pipe. It's happening. There's no choice but to get on the train. Like the direction of travel is very clear,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you either are going to be impacted and get ahead of it today, or you're not, and you're going to lose market share and lose trust with clients.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
um, that's at least that's my personal viewpoint. I think it's really
Yeah.
a problem we have to solve.
And
It's
based on
20
everything
degrees
we
in
said
Toronto.
before, yeah, based on everything we said before, I'm sure that this will grow more and more, around that. You just have to do it. You have no choice. And people will look for you. So that's a great place to be.
100%. And in addition to that, we're all part of the same communities.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
as a business, I know we talked about the social element early. I do believe that businesses do have a responsibility to be stewards of their communities and help
Absolutely.
support and grow them, right? And part of that is providing good paying jobs and benefits that allow people to live and buy
Right.
things in the economy. And other parts of it is, ensuring that, they can continue to have that social license to operate,
Yeah.
which in my opinion should include thinking about the climate impact of your company.
Well, live in a better world for the future, for sure.
And if not for you, then your kids.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Going back to your founder journey, what is the most challenging moment, as a founder, and how did you navigate that?
Well, I think one of the hardest moments for me personally was trying to raise that first outside capital. So pulling together that group, we tried to raise 1.5, and then we didn't get the traction we wanted, so we dropped it down to 750K, and then we had to, and then that was our first close, but then we were trying to get it oversubscribed, and then I'll never forget, I was sitting in London. I was having my first vacation in a year, and in England, and I had COVID,
Oh
and
no.
I was trying to negotiate the term sheet with this lead investor that we'd finally pulled to the table, and I could barely concentrate on the words on the page. Never mind trying to negotiate complicated financial terms. I just remember there being a moment after that call. I took off my jacket, and my entire back and body was just covered in sweat after a 45-minute call, basically sleeping for the next 15 hours. So I'd say that was the most physically and mentally hard part of the entire journey, because fundamentally, if we didn't get that capital, it wasn't going to happen. And we are looking at a market where we were just starting to see the softening of the fundraising market at that moment, and not many companies were doing deals. It was, I remember talking to our lawyers, and they're saying we usually are dealing with 15 to 20 deals at any given time. You are the only deal we're working on that has new money coming in.
Wow. Wow. So
So I knew that if we didn't close that deal at that time, what did the next steps look like? Because that the week before we got funded, I was floating the company cash to pay the payroll.
I could feel it there, right, when you were telling me that story. And also, life happens. So it's not just you're a founder and you're out of context of everything else. You have other things going on. You had COVID at the time, and I can kudos for you to be able to go through that and be like a great goalie there, as he said. I thank you for that story. Absolutely. So after experiencing that, when was it like the moment in this journey that you felt, yes, we have something here, we're going to do it?
I think there's two. I think any founder, well, me personally, I don't think it's ever one moment. It's kind of an accumulation of moments, right? So I think for us, signing that first contract, which we did in, I think it was March 21, right? So right before we did our fundraise, I think that was the first moment where we said, okay, wow, we've got a client who is committing to us, and we really have to deliver on it, right? And they believe in what we're doing. And then the second moment after that, I think, was when we started growing that pipeline and started seeing larger and larger companies who are coming to us to help them solve their climate challenges, right? Starting from a place of, oh, well, we're just going to go after the small and medium businesses because they need the most help, to realizing, actually, look at all these incredibly respected businesses trying to solve the same problem, and we can help them too. And so I think that's when I realized that the need for a product like this was a lot broader than I would have expected. And that by frankly, like often ignoring competition and just really focusing on what our client needs were, that some of what we built, you know, was inherently valuable, regardless of how much funding some of our competitors had. We were starting to win because we were listening really intently.
Yeah, and that's a great feeling, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're still early in the journey, but it does. Every day I get more confidence, and that comes from talking to our customers, and it comes from looking at the growth of the team,
Yeah,
because every week we're getting better. And so if I
perfect.
look at those two things together,
Yeah,
that gives me a
absolutely.
huge amount of confidence.
And now this is also, it's a niche, still a niche, like growing, but many people don't know about it yet. And also with the regulatory changes and stuff like that, how do you keep yourself updated and motivated to move on?
Mm. It's a lot of reading. It's a lot of LinkedIn, following the right people, signing. There's a lot of industry knowledge that comes through newsletters. So it's just a general accumulation over time. I think it's no longer the case that you can just read a magazine or an industry publication and have the answers. It's You really have to look at all these different streams of information and try to figure out how to get the most recent and applicable data, and hold yourself to account and hire amazing people that know their stuff.
Any specific recommendations for reading for other people that want to get into this industry?
Yeah, so I'd say there's a couple of communities. So My Climate Journey is a really good community for climate to get into. Terra.do is a good enablement community for education and upskilling for people who aren't in climate. And
Mhm.
then in terms of news, ESG Today is good. Bloomberg Green has a really good newsletter as well. Just talk to people who are in the space; they'll be able to direct you as well. And My Climate Journey has locations in a huge number of cities across North America, and they're free events most of the time. So I would just show up.
And just in very, very short, like bullets, what will be the three tips you would give a founder?
Mm, Listen to your customer, build as little as possible, and get contracts.
Awesome, awesome. That's great tips. And that's what we love about, like, new reaction like that is where you get the right stuff. We always ask our guests for shout outs for other products, either another product that you want to shout out to. It could be in a sustainability or environment related.
Cool. So first shout out I'd obviously want to give to is my team, because they're amazing and I'm really lucky I get to work with them every day.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's a great shout
Um,
out.
in terms of products, I think Manifest Climate is doing some really cool stuff. So they do a lot of work around the qualitative side of disclosures and trying to make that really easy for companies to do and reduce the cost there. And I think they've got a really amazing product team, and they're doing some really awesome stuff. And they're a fellow Canadian company, which is a bonus. I think on the engagement side, Climate Neutral Club, I think, is doing some cool stuff. So yeah, shout out to them. And then in terms of products that we use, like, we love Figma, we love Notion, we love Slack. Like, those are really the core operating system of our business.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you for that. What do you think about this conversation, about this podcast? What do you like about it?
It's fun. It's good. I think it, it's interesting to take the product lens when you're a founder, because you realize how much of an overlap there is between founder work and product work, and really how strategic product work is at the core responsibility of a founder at the beginning of its journey, especially. So
Yeah.
It's fun to be able to talk to somebody like yourself who's got a lot of experience in product and maybe validate some of
Thank
those
you. I appreciate it. I appreciate
ways of thinking.
it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it was fun for me as well. I love these discussions, and I always learn something new. So it's always good. And then finally, where people can find you if they want to reach out to you.
Yeah, hit me up on LinkedIn. It's probably the best way. Sanders Lazier, Lazier, carbonhound.com. So you can see what we get up to there. It's a no judgment zone. We're here to help and try to help you take those first steps on that climate journey. So please.
So next time when you're coming to the podcast, you have to have like a shirt with Gus as your mascot here, or maybe a little doll there with Gus there, because we want to meet Gus as well.
Yeah, we're actually making we're trying to make a trophy for, we call it the Hound of the Month for, as kind of employee of the month sort of thing.
Oh, nice,
So
nice.
if we
So
build it, we're going to 3D print it. Maybe I'll have that ready for you guys next
and
time.
hopefully, I'm sure it will be carbon zero when you do that, right?
Of course.
Of course. Perfect. Thank you so much, Sanders, for coming today to the show. That was a pleasure. Really appreciate your time with us here. And all I can wish you is like keep growing, keep doing what you're doing because it's great.
Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Honored for the invite. And yeah, we'll chat soon.
Perfect. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Moshe Mikanowski, and this is Beyond Product Podcast. Stay tuned for more episodes. Bye bye.